Hi, this is a fairly in-depth lesson on practicing to play rock guitar chords. For playing rock guitar, you normally play with distortion, and with distortion, it is literally distorting the notes. So the more notes you play, the more distortion you get, the more distorted the entire chord will sound, or all the notes would sound together played. So in general, most guitarists that played rock music adapted that when they play with distortion, they play with simplified chords, less notes than a normal chord, so that because the more notes, it just got harder to hear what was really going on there. This became popular, and maybe people like Chuck Berry or something like that popularized it, I'm not really sure, but what it became to be known as the power chord. You've probably heard this term before. If you haven't, that's what most guitarists that play rock and roll, rock, metal, whatever type of music play. In fact, the heavier of the type of music, the more it generally is something similar to a power chord. What a power chord is you take a normal chord and you play it in a, let's say, a barred position like this. Here's a normal open E. And now let's play the bar chord version of it. Let's play it in the G position, at the third position. If you were just to focus on just two notes out of this chord, the top two notes of it, it would be these two right here, this one and that one. So just go ahead and release all the rest of the fingers and play just those two. That is really just the first and the fifth of the chord. Now, musically, technically, whatever, theoretically, as in music theory, you can't call that a chord, because a chord is generally comprised of three notes. If it's just two notes, it's just an interval. That interval would be a fifth, or a perfect fifth. So you go on a 1 and a 5. So it's called a power chord, but it's really just a fifth of an interval. We call it the power chord because we play it like a chord in most rock music, and it sounds like this. Those are just power chords, right? Most guitar players play, or some guitar players play more than just the first two, the first and the fifth. They actually add one more note to it on the next string across, which happens to be an octave of the first. So what you end up is a 1, 5, and an octave again. Still can't really be called a chord, really mainly because with just a 1 and a 5, you can't tell if it's a minor or a major chord, which is very important in the categories of chords. If you break chords down into categories, two of the highest level categories would be major and minor. With a major and a minor, you differentiate between the two, between your third. Do you have a flatted third or a normal third? Okay, that's the difference between a major G and a minor G right there. Well, again, with just 1, 3, 5, you don't have that third. So this is still really a power chord. What you do is you can play it any way you want. A lot of people play it by still just barring it like this. Your first note is not necessarily barred. Held with your index finger, and you bar at least across the next two strings with your ring finger. That's a common way to play it. The way that I find myself probably playing it more commonly is to play it like you would a normal bar chord, which is to index finger here, ring finger here, pinky finger holding down the octave of the top note. So there is a power chord on the low E string. Now you need to be able to play power chords somewhere other than just with the low E string being the bass note. So you take the power chord, and the idea behind the power chord is taking that traditional bar chord like this, and really only playing 3 notes out of it. The top 3, I call this the top for now. The top will be, you know, these 3 fingers here, these 3 notes here. The first 3 strings of it, let's say. That just happens to be 1, 3, 5. This in particular bar chord is derived from an open E. See, this is the open E bar chord shape, or the E bar chord shape, if you were to take cage theory or something similar to that, right? So there's 3 other shapes that you need to be familiar with, or you should be familiar with. There's the open A type shape. Here's an open A chord. Now let's move that around, right? Or you could play like this. Oops. We only look up at the top 3 notes. Happens to be the exact same shape as the open E type of chord, because we only care about the first 3 notes. So, exact same thing, just played on the A string instead. Okay, there's how to play the E shape and the A shape. Now let's look at the next string over, which is our D string. Let's look at how to play the D shape. A D open chord would be this. We have the open D and the rest of the notes that support it. Let's ignore everything except for the first 3 notes, or the first 3 strings out of the chord. So we have the D, the G, and the B string. So we have this. Alright, let's play that a little bit differently. Let's play it like this. Now let's move it. Okay, so what you have is almost the exact same shape, except because between the D string and the B string happens to be tuned. All the rest of the strings are tuned to fourths. The B string happens to not be tuned fourth. It has to be tuned flat compared to the rest of the strings. So your B string, you have to make up for what would normally be. You have to add an extra half step to it, because that is your major 7th. Okay. So this is the open. This is the D type of power chord. So practice doing something like that, moving between those 3 shapes. Finally, we have the open G type, or the G type of power chord. I'm calling it this. This probably isn't very common, but there's 4 different shapes, and I'm relating them to their open chord movable positions. So this one is called, what I'll call the G type. So an open G would be this. We're playing the G as the root here, but let's play it like the rest of them and consider the open G string our bass note. Okay, so if the open G string is our bass note, let's forget about everything else and we'll be playing this. Alright, so let's refinger that and just bar across with our pinky. Now let's move it. Okay. One of these cases is the same thing. We're playing the root, the 5th, and the root again. So in this case here, we're playing the B, the fifth, which is the same thing as a G. Oh, sorry, G flat, and the octave, the B again. And it's the same thing with the other one. These are octaves. So basically octaves with a fifth in between them. You could think of them like that. You're playing just octaves with a fifth added between the gap of the two strings. Anyway, so add those four together and mess around with playing them. Just move them between the four different positions or ways to play it and get used to that. And just work on that. Those are the four different ways you most commonly play chords, power chords, and rock and roll. And for a beginner, for a beginner guitar player, learn to play rock. That'll get you further than anything else you practice, because if you learn those chords right there, a large portion of songs that are popular only use those type chords, and even if a lot of them don't use just those type of chords, even if a lot of them add in different tonalities to it, thirds and such, being able to play it with just those type of chords instead, most people, if you played along with the album or didn't, wouldn't know the difference unless the tonality of it really brought out the flavor of the chord. Regardless, it wouldn't sound that far off from the original. What I'm saying is, if I were to play this right here, but if instead the real song played a minor G, there's so little difference. Between not playing the third in there and playing it as a power chord and adding the minor third in there and playing it as a power chord plus one note. As you can tell, I mean, there was a difference, but you'd have to really be paying attention. Most people would, other people are more musically inclined than myself, and they go like, oh, that's definitely different right there. For me, it would probably go by without me ever really knowing the difference, because my ear is not that great, I guess, compared to most players. So, work on power chords. Work on playing them in the four different ways to play them. Move them around. Get comfortable with them. Do like I was doing, which was adding palm muting to it and adding fret hand muting to it, which is something we'll talk about some other time, or maybe someone else will talk about very, very briefly. What I'm doing is, if I want the chord to sound very staccato sounding, I'm releasing the pressure that I'm holding down with it after I play it with my fret hand. So here's me holding it down tight, and here's me releasing it. Fingers tight, releasing, tight, releasing, tight, releasing. I'm adding to that, I'm muting the string out after I played it immediately with this hand to deaden the strings. So those two techniques added together gives you this type of sound. Now add on top of that palm muting to everything, and you have the very staccato metal sound. And that's how you get the very staccato, muted metal type of riff sound right there. That's it.